You've been arranging access to accounts that don't open until after the wedding. I heard you say it myself. This woman is confused or lying. Either my name isn't Comfort, I'm Jeed's mother, and I've spent 3 weeks watching exactly the kind of person you become when you think no one who matters is watching. Jide, please, I can explain everything.
Explain the accounts, explain the timing, explain why every date on this wedding somehow lined up with a funding milestone.
Pack your things and go before your father wakes. Ada was 17 when her mother whispered those words to her in the dark, pressing a small bundle of clothes into her hands like it was the last kindness the house had left to give. By morning, Ada was gone from the only village she'd ever known, carrying a child nobody in that house had wanted, and a heartbreak that would take her 23 years to fully understand the shape of. She had no way of knowing, standing at that gate with nowhere to go, that the boy growing inside her would one day own gates of his own, tall iron ones, guarding a house bigger than the entire compound she'd just been thrown out of. This is the story of Ada, her son Jide, and the two very different women who would one day stand at his door, pretending to want nothing at all. Ike had promised her the moon before he ever knew there was a baby involved. "You are the only girl for me," he used to say, walking her home along the river path in the evenings. And Ada, young and in love, the uncomplicated way 17-year-olds are, believed every word of it completely. The moment she told him about the pregnancy, the moon disappeared entirely. "I'm not ready for this," he said, backing away from her like the news itself might follow him home. "I can't do this, Ada." "We can face it together," she pleaded. "I want nothing to do with you or that child," he said, yeah, and walked off into the dark. And that, as far as Ada ever knew, was the last complete sentence Ike ever said to her. Her father's reaction, when the pregnancy could no longer be hidden under loose wrappers, was somehow crueler for how calm it was. "You have shamed this house," he said, not raising his voice, not needing to. Her mother cried into her own hands in the doorway, but did not argue with him. And by the next morning, Ada was walking a dirt road out of the only home she'd ever known, carrying one bag and a future nobody else believed in. She gave birth alone in a rented room in a town 3 days' walk from the village, delivered by a midwife who took payment in the form of a small gold ring Ada had kept sewn into her wrapper for exactly this kind of emergency. When the baby finally cried, healthy and loud, Ada held him and, through exhausted tears, named him Jide. Hold on to life. Because that was, in that particular moment, the only prayer she had left in her. She raised him the way women raise children when there is no safety net beneath either of them. Selling roasted corn by day, taking in laundry by night, walking miles instead of paying transport fares she couldn't spare. When Jide, at 7, finally asked the question she'd been dreading since his first cry, she didn't flinch. "Mama, do I have a father?" "You do," she told him honestly. "He isn't with us. He decided before you were even born that he didn't want to be." "Why?" "He was afraid," she said. "That's not something you did wrong. That's something he chose." Jide considered this with the terrible seriousness only children manage. "I don't need him," he finally said. "I'll make you proud instead, Mama. You already do," she told him, and meant it completely. Jide kept that promise the slow, unglamorous way promises actually get kept. Studying by candlelight when the power failed. Walking 2 hours to a better school because Ada insisted the extra distance was worth it. Working odd repair jobs on the side for pocket money he mostly gave straight back to her. He was, by every account of every teacher who ever taught him, relentlessly, almost stubbornly diligent. He built his first hospitality venture at 24, a single modest guest house near a bus terminal financed by a loan Ada helped guarantee using nearly every asset she owned. It was not much to look at. It was, to both of them, the entire world. "Mama, we did it," he said, standing in front of the newly painted sign the day it opened. "You did it," she corrected gently. "I only refused to let you quit." The single guest house became 3. 3 became a small regional chain. By the time Jide was 32, Okoye Hospitality Group owned boutique hotels in 4 cities, and business magazines had started using words like self-made and visionary in headlines with his photograph beneath them. Ada still lived in the same modest 2-bedroom house she'd bought with her first real savings, and no amount of pleading from her increasingly wealthy son could talk her out of it. "Mama, Come and stay in the mansion, he tried again over dinner one evening. I like my small house, Jeedy. You've suffered enough. Let me finally take care of you properly. You already do, she said, every single day. That has nothing to do with square footage. She studied him a moment. There's something else on your mind tonight. He hesitated. There's someone I've been seeing. Her name is Vera. A woman? Why am I only hearing this now? She's been busy. She runs a growing events company. I think she might be the one. Ada set down her fork slowly. I hope, for both your sakes, that you're right. Vera was, by any objective measure, dazzling. Polished, quick-witted, effortlessly at ease in every room she walked into, the kind of woman photographers at galas instinctively turned their cameras toward. Jide proposed to her on a hotel rooftop he'd personally designed, and she said yes before he'd even fully finished the question. What Jide didn't see, because he wasn't looking for it, was the particular calculation behind Vera's eyes whenever the conversation drifted toward his company's valuation, or the way her enthusiasm for the wedding date always seemed to track suspiciously close to Okoye Hospitality's next major funding round. Ada saw it immediately, the one time she was finally introduced. She said nothing about it out loud. She simply began, quietly, to watch more carefully. The accident that changed everything happened on an ordinary Tuesday evening, in the kind of way accidents usually do. Ada was walking home from the market when a speeding Okada clipped a stall, sending crates and shouting bystanders in every direction. And in the chaos, Ada was knocked hard to the ground, her bag of vegetables scattering across the road. A young woman appeared out of the crowd almost instantly, kneeling beside her, checking her over with quick, practiced hands. Ma, are you hurt? Can you move your arm? I think I'm all right, Ada managed, shaken. Just winded. Let me walk you home just to be safe. I insist. The young woman's name was Tony, and over the 10-minute walk to Ada's house, she asked nothing about who Ada was, expected nothing in return for the help, and simply talked, easily, warmly, about her job as a front desk manager at a hotel downtown, about her mother back in Warri, about a promotion she was hoping for, but wasn't counting on too hard. Which hotel? Ada asked, more out of politeness than curiosity. Okoye Grand, downtown branch. Ada went very still for a moment. That's my son's company. Tony laughed, delighted rather than impressed. Small world. He's a good boss, from what I hear. Strict, but fair. Ada watched her walk away afterward and thought, for the first time in a long while, this one is worth paying attention to. If you've ever wondered how you'd really know someone's heart before you handed them your whole future, tell me in the comments, because what Ada does next is about to answer that question the hard way. Jide, I need to know something for certain, Ada said, a week later, sitting across from her son with the particular stillness she reserved for conversations she'd already made her mind up about. I want to test Vera before this wedding goes any further. Test her how, Mama? Let me come into your house, not as your mother, as staff. Let's see how she treats someone she believes has no power over her at all. Jide rubbed his temple, visibly uncomfortable. Mama, that feels extreme. How someone treats a person they think matters least, Ada said evenly, is the only honest test there is. Everything else is a performance for an audience. He held out for another few days before finally relenting, the way he always eventually did with her. Fine. But if this goes on too long, I'm ending it myself. From today, Ada said, already planning, my name is Comfort. Vera moved into the mansion 2 weeks before the wedding, greeting the household staff with the breezy, distracted courtesy of someone who genuinely never expected to remember any of their names. She barely registered Comfort beyond a passing glance and an instruction to have her bags brought upstairs. The cracks showed themselves quickly, and they widened fast. A cold cup of coffee became a public dressing down. A minor scheduling mix-up became, in Vera's retelling to Jide that evening, evidence that these people take advantage if you're not firm with them. Jide, watching quietly from the next room more than once, felt something in his chest tighten with every retelling. Was I too hard on her just now? He asked once, genuinely unsettled. She's staff, Jide. Don't let sentiment cloud good management, Vera said, already moving on to the next topic. The night everything finally cracked open began with an overheard phone call. Ada wasn't supposed to hear it all, Vera's voice, low and urgent, drifting from behind a half-closed door. I told you. I need this locked in before the wedding, not after. Once the joint accounts are set up, it doesn't matter what happens between us. Just make sure the transfer paperwork is ready the week before. Ada stood frozen in the hallway, her hand pressed flat against the wall, and understood, with total clarity, exactly what kind of test her son had almost failed to give himself in time. She confronted Vera 2 nights later in front of Gidi, laying out everything she'd overheard with the same calm, unhurried voice she'd used her whole life to deliver hard truths. You've been arranging access to accounts that don't open until after the wedding, Ada said. I heard you say it myself. This woman is confused, Vera said quickly, turning to Gidi. Or lying. Either way, she has no business listening at doors, and you should fire her immediately. Vera, Ada said, my name isn't Comfort. I'm Jide's mother, and I've spent 3 weeks watching exactly the kind of person you become when you think no one who matters is watching. The room went completely silent. Vera's composure, so carefully maintained for months, finally slipped all the way off. Jide, please, I can explain everything. Explain the accounts, he said, quiet, controlled in the specific way that frightened people more than shouting ever could. Explain the timing. Explain why every date on this wedding somehow lined up with a funding milestone. She had no explanation that survived being said out loud. By the end of that week, the engagement was over, and Vera was gone from both the mansion and the company's investor conversations entirely. I almost married her, Mama, Jide said quietly, days later, sitting across from Ada in her small, familiar living room. But you didn't, Ada said. That's what matters. How do I trust anyone again after this? Slowly, she said, carefully, and maybe by paying attention to people who were kind to you before they had any reason to expect something back. Jide looked up. Tony? I didn't say her name, Ada said, allowing herself a small smile. But I noticed you did. Jide asked Tony to dinner the following month, a small, unremarkable restaurant, deliberately far from anywhere either of them might be recognized. She showed up in the same easy, unhurried way she'd walked him and Ada through that chaotic evening months earlier, entirely unbothered by the modesty of the venue. I thought you'd want somewhere fancier, he admitted. This is fine. I just wanted to actually talk to you, she said. Not the version of you that runs meetings, the regular one. He found over the following weeks that he liked the regular version of himself considerably more in her company than he had in almost anyone else's in years. Still, doubt lingered in the particular way it does for people who've been burned once already. Mama, what if she's just better at hiding it than Vera was? Then find out the honest way, Ada said. Not cruelly, but honestly. The company's near collapse that followed was, in every headline that ran that week, entirely convincing, because Jide had spent considerable money and effort making absolutely sure it would be. Bank accounts appeared frozen. A press release, drafted personally and released without his executive team's full knowledge, announced catastrophic losses from a failed overseas expansion. He moved out of the mansion into a modest rented flat and told almost no one it wasn't real. Tony found out about the collapse the same way everyone else did, through frantic news alerts, and showed up at his door within the hour, not with questions about her own now uncertain job, but with a container of jollof rice and a worried expression that had nothing performative in it at all. I don't even have work to offer you anymore, Jide said, genuinely unsettled by how easily the lie was landing. I didn't come here about a job, Tony said. I came to check on you. She kept coming back, with food, with small practical suggestions about consulting work he could start with almost nothing, with a stubborn, unglamorous loyalty that outlasted every other person who'd once orbited his success. His old business partner stopped returning calls within a week. Friends who used to fill his events calendar developed sudden, permanent scheduling conflicts. Everyone else left, Jide said one evening, watching her set 2 plates on a second-hand table in his rented flat. I'm still here, Tony said simply. I never loved the mansion, Jide. I don't know how to explain it any better than that. It was in that same small kitchen, weeks later, that he finally told her the truth. The collapse, the apartment, losing everything. None of it was real, he said. I needed to know for certain, after Vera, whether anyone could actually love me without the company attached. Tony's face went through several things at once: confusion, hurt, something harder underneath both. You let me worry. You let me spend money I didn't really have to spare on groceries for a crisis that wasn't happening. I know, I'm sorry. It was wrong of me. It was, she agreed. I forgive you, Jadi, but you don't get to test me like that again. Not ever. Never again, he promised. I mean that completely. He took her back to the mansion himself the following weekend, watching her expression shift from confusion to disbelief as the gates, the very gates that had once, in a different life, closed behind his own mother the day she'd been thrown out of her father's house, swung open in front of them. Jide, this place, it was never actually gone. It was never gone, he confirmed. Tony, I want you to properly meet my mother. Ada stepped out onto the veranda, no headscarf, no borrowed name, simply herself. You already know me a little, she said gently, as comfort. Tony's hand flew to her mouth. The woman from the accident. You're his mother. I am. And you've already passed every test I could have thought to give you without ever knowing you were being watched at all. They married 8 months later in a ceremony neither of them wanted made large or extravagant in the same modest garden where Ada had once quietly decided this particular young woman was worth paying attention to. Ada stood at the front, watching her son marry someone who'd been kind to a stranger with no idea what that kindness would eventually be worth, and thought, not for the first time, about a dark road out of a village 23 years earlier, and a mother who'd whispered go instead of stay because it was, in its own broken way, the only kindness left available to give. I raised him alone, she said quietly to no one in particular, watching the two of them dance. And look at him now. Mama, Jida said later that evening, finding her at the edge of the garden. None of this happens without you. It happens because of the both of you now, she corrected. My part was only ever the beginning. If Ada's story reminded you that character reveals itself in exactly the moments people think no one important is watching, tell us in the comments where you're watching from and who in your own life has already passed that test without ever knowing they were taking it. Subscribe to Tales of Africa Studio so you never miss the next story like this one.